Hey everybody, this is Silverspook, and this is the Silverspook video about is war over resources human nature? And let's talk about that. So, um, yeah, I want to leave that image up there. I won't comment on it too much. Um, I spent a good half an hour working on that. I was like, oh, what am I gonna do for this? And I was like, I'll just leave it like that. But yeah. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of look at and examine, given the current state of affairs, the current state of gestures vaguely around. Um, what is the normal, what is the inevitability of the, or what some people, I guess kind of prompting it is that there's many places where this kind of thing comes up, obviously many different contexts and spaces where this comes up. Obviously, I've talked about it previously, but the American video game Fallout begins with kind of this. Most of them begin um, with war. War never changes, right? That is famously voiced by Ron Perlman, at least in the original. I don't know if you ever played those. Let me just get the actual quote so I don't say it from my memory, which is full to the brim with Neofeud 2 related material. So let's get that one. Yeah, so the intro narration of Fallout begins with war never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. But war never changes. Then it goes on, in the 21st century, war was still waged over the resources that could be acquired. Only this time, the spoils of war were also its weapons, petroleum and uranium. For these resources, yeah, okay. Sorry, my computer's all the websites are destroying. The websites are fighting wars over my computer's CPU and RAM resources because of the greed of corporations fighting over the resources of global money supplies. Anyways, can you stop? Okay. Anyway, so it's like war never changes. It was a sequence that it's well known. Anybody who's been in the Fallout universe, if you don't know the Fallout universe, then you probably don't. But it's like well known. This a similar speech happens at the beginning of basically all the Fallout video games. For these resources like petroleum and uranium, China would invade Alaska. This was created in the 90s, so this is deeply science fictional. For these resources, China would invade Alaska. U.S. would annex Canada, and the European Commonwealth would dissolve into quarreling, bickering nation states, bent on controlling the last remaining resources on Earth. In 2077, the storm of World War had come again. In 2 brief hours, most of the planet was reduced to cinders. And from the ashes of nuclear devastation, a new civilization would struggle to arise. So anyway, it's kind of like the assumption in this is just a video game, right? But it's kind of like this is like deeper built in. It's a Western made game. It's a U.S. made game. It's a American, California based, game developer made game. But it resonates a lot of people because there are shared assumptions there, right? Like nobody really questions that when it starts with war never changes. It's not like a controversial statement. It's certainly in the Western world, the United States, definitely, and in Europe, I would argue, definitely. it's just like, of course it doesn't. Like, of course it does. Of course it doesn't. Like, and like it's kind of like to struggle against that. I mean, obviously, when people talk about peace, ceasefire, like obviously a lot of the '60s was about trying to build, peace and love was also because of the even at that time, right? Korean War, Vietnam War, all these wars that were going on, Cold War, right? World War II had just ended, and then more wars are already, just raging even immediately after World War II, or what was considered the end of World War II, right? But it's like so it just kind of assumes that like the Romans wanted slaves and they wanted wealth, which is obviously the agricultural products, metals, precious metals, and other animals and other resources and money and control over money that the Romans managed to acquire, which is how they built their colosseums and their large, gaudy capital in Rome, which still exists to this day. It's in a place called, it is called Italy now. And Spain, lusted for gold and territory. And of course they talk about in the 20th century. Then they jump to Hitler. We conveniently left out Britain, France, and the U.S. Empire. Interestingly, the biggest, most significant, most planetarily destructive, and most greedy, and the amount of wealth that they have accumulated, just conveniently left all those out. Well, I mean, because it's made in, the Anglo-Saxon world, so we can't be too quote unquote on the nose about that, I suppose. So otherwise people might not play our video games. But it's kind of like these are all assumptions, right? That it's not, this is not a critique of Fallout. Those are assumptions. Those are assumptions in the collective West. Like, those are American assumptions. Those are, quote unquote, the free world's assumptions that there is inevitable war and that it never changes. All parties of the United States of any size currently are pro-war, right? And they just have different justifications for them. The European Union collectively also is all at war, right? Really terrible war, really human rights atrocity filled, just the most terrible war you can imagine. The genocidal, so it's like I do think that there's like a built-in assumption there. That's kind of what I want to talk about in this video. Anyway, so is war over resources human nature is a question, though, right? Is that true, right? Also, interestingly, how like in that quote, because some people say, well, the Rome and Greece, these are completely, and even the Spanish era, and then these are completely separate from the European colonial era, or the last 500 years of the colonial era, and the U.S. imperial planetary neo-colonial era. Those are completely separate, and they're doing the same thing. I mean, it is true. I mean, like they're doing essentially the same thing. The Romans did fight wars, right? You can watch it in Gladiator. I think I have a video about that from a few weeks back. Let me just check to see if I do without destroying my stream. Well, last week I talked about Neofeud 2. I'll talk about that as well. Neofeud 2 deals with this topic. Maybe not a few weeks back. Okay, maybe I didn't make one. Okay, I gotta go make a Gladiator video. Did I not make one? Really? Oh, Romulus. Yeah, because Alien Romulus. Again, all roads lead back to Rome. But But yeah, in Gladiator, you can actually see Gladiator the movie, by the way. Um, I'm trying not to get too off topic. Starring Gerard Butler, came out in 2000 at the height of arguably the peak, the apex of planetary imperial power. It's a planetary hegemony. It was pre 9/11, post collapse of the fall of the Berlin Wall, collapse of the Soviet Union. Um, Probably the most drunk on power that the U.S. imperial and the global oligarchic elite have ever been, probably, or not necessarily the most drunk on power. It's the most able to exert their power, maybe in this year, in which a movie about a Roman a Roman general. The main character is he is made to be an underdog, but he is in fact he committed mass massacres. He committed like just horrible slaughter as a general, eradicating people in Germania, in the western it wasn't really Europe then, right? It was just the western end of the Eurasian continent, right? Gaul. He's they call him the Spaniard, right? But it wasn't, there wasn't really a Spain at that time, right? But he went into that region and or was from that region, and then was in the Roman Empire, collecting slaves, slaughtering the peoples that were native to different areas there, forcing everybody into the Roman Empire, Roman culture, Roman language, Roman capitalistic system of mass accumulations of wealth in the center that is Rome, and exertion of its will, right, to control the vassals, right, abroad. This is just like what we have today, where we have horrible mass planetary slaughterers, resource controllers, right, exploiting horribly people's in the furthest flung areas, especially, vassalizing all the nearby territories, like Canada. I mean, the United States, obviously, the U.S. is the Rome, the DC is the Rome, and then we have the vassals in Canada, Europe itself, the whatever is within the so-called rules-based order. That is the new Roman territory, right? And everything beyond that is still barbarians, right? Like, that's why they drive. If you're beyond what the United States new Roman Empire deems within its a quote unquote good free democratic country, then you are barbarian. Like, you are, they drew, like Vladimir Putin with the as Genghis Khan, and they have like the yellow peril, and there are savages in these Arab lands, and definitely in Palestine, and they're all so like it's still the Roman Empire. It's actually, like, in one sense, absolutely nothing has changed. So when the follow intro says, Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth, and then you and Spain, also had enslaved people and gathered mass wealth, and then Hitler in Germany. I mean, let's throw in not just Hitler in Germany. Let's throw in Britain, France, and all of the European powers plus Japan. And they built economic planetary superpowers, fought each other, blew each other up in 2 world wars, and then the United States took over on a planetary scale. The United States took over on a planetary scale, but the same system never ended. Right? It was a continued war to gather wealth and slaves. Endless war to gather wealth and slaves, with brief periods of peace, mostly filled with agitation and itching trigger fingers and itching sword fingers to get out and conquer more and steal more. That actually is that is the history. It's not actually, that's not false. So in that sense, like, it is I wouldn't say it's human nature, but it is a lot of history It is a lot of some humans' history. Now, whether it's human nature, that's another question, right? Um, in one sense, if you believe, right? I get if you believe that war never changes, and war over resources never changes, right? Then you should be a doomer. There's recently a video came out. It's called "Why Doomer." It was on this why capitalism loves doomers, right? It's a video on this YouTube channel, and so if you believe that is inevitable, then
attention retirees, it makes total sense. To be at your computer from 9 a.m. to 10:45 a.m.
playing. If you believe that, then like videos like this, right? Let's talk about capitalism loves doomers. Then it's reasonable to doom out because nuclear war is inevitable, right? Because we do have nuclear superpowers. The fallout future is inevitable, right? You're all gonna die, right? We're all gonna die, right? And you see actually most of where the doomering happens, right? Most of where the doomering happens, it tends to be in a certain part of the world that has historically been the place that has been doing. I would actually argue the more there, you could probably draw a correlation between the percentage of doomerism and places that have done the most crushing, conquering, massacring, and stealing of resources and enslaving, right? You can actually probably draw a line. It's almost probably going to be close to 1-to-1. It's like a Venn diagram. People who like are descended from and continue to exist under ancestors, systems, countries, and businesses and governments that historically have done mass war, mass conquest, mass colonialism, etc. And the people that are doomering out now, because then it leads to like, well, inevitably we're going to have to fight another war, and that is going to destroy everything, and then we're going to have to, collect a lot of rat-away and like Nuka-Cola bottle caps, because that's the only thing that can happen, right? That's the only thing that can possibly happen. That does benefit a capitalist system, because then you give up on everything. You're like, what's the point of even trying to impact the world, right? It is a very cynical, pessimistic view. But I mean, that whole view is obviously from the get-go pessimistic. That all we can ever do is keep shooting each other, blowing each other up, in terms of like Neofeud, that's this Neofeud and Neofeud 2 is a big it's a struggle over that narrative, right? Because one side in the game Neofeud 2, one side is definitely of that bent, right? There's a groups of people and entities that are like, this is the only thing that can happen. The only question, there will be these systems. The only question is, will you be on the table? Will you be at the table, or will you be on the menu? We're gonna, we're just gonna keep doing this over and over again. We're gonna keep warring, conquesting, enslaving, exploiting, brainwashing, lying to people, and to get them to give us free labor and or be cannon fodder for our wars over resources. That's ad infinitum across the galaxy. That's all we'll ever do, right? So the only question is just get as high up. In Neofeud is basically like, it's better to be in the palace. It's better to be in the Roman capital at the top, as high as you can get, right? It's better to be in like the Athens. Don't want to be somebody out there running around Asia trying to kill people. You can get yourself killed that way. You want to be as high up in the Sparta, in the oligarchic, the boardroom of Greece, which had aristocratic men, and this is what the American democracy was based on: aristocratic landed men. The women didn't count so much, and definitely not the slaves that were largely a lot of them not Hellenic, right? You want to be as high in the toga party board of directors. You want to be as close to the central bank money printer, as what's his name, John Mayer once said. No, what was it? I have his quote right here. Let me make sure I don't get that wrong. Give me control over a country's money supply. I care not who makes its laws. That was one of the bankers, Mayor Rothschild. I'm sorry, not John Mayer. He said some pop music lyrics. That's all he said. Give me control over a nation's currency. I care not who makes its laws. As Mayor Rothschild once said. So what matters is that you stay inside the capital. You stay in the boardroom, right? Get as close to the billionaire Wagyu beef fed by macadamia nut grown bunker as possible, right? Get as close to the people like taking the ayahuasca, right? And going to the mall and going to Burning Man. Get as close to those people as you possibly can. Get as high up the ladder as you can. Like hang out with billionaires if you can, right? Just get in the Mile High Club, right? Get into Hollywood, get into DC, right? Get to the top of the 200 floors of the New York City buildings where helicopters fly in, right? While the rest of Rome burns in wildfire and social upheaval and collapse, right? That's all you can do is escalate yourself up this ladder. You can't change the ladder, and you can't change the human nature. It's inevitable. So just play the game, right? And Neofeud 1 is definitely like Neofeud 1 is a game that definitely is like it's mostly about the metropole, right? The central fulcrum of power, right? The place, the boardroom and everything in that. It's a vertical slice of the heart of darkness, right? Right, Neofeud 1. And it's mostly about Carl Carbon, who starts out as a social worker, a poor social worker and sentient rights. Poor cyborg social worker for half human, half wolf chimeras with like litters of invalid children discarded by eugenics corporations and like sentient machines. It's a science fictional world, right? But it's about like people on the bottom of that totem pole, ultra poor minority people, giant like favelas full of collapsing housing, and then where people have to like weld together bits of broken Huffy bikes and phones to make replacement parts for the robot arms. And then it kind of climbs the ladder from like low level workers, mid management, right? Your boss when you work at Walmart, and then it's like the knights / cops that get paid bigger salaries but do a lot of terrible things against people inside to control the inside of the metropole, inside the Roman core. And then it goes higher and higher and higher to the mayors and the senators and the so-called elected representatives of the so-called democracies. And then it goes all the way to the top of like the multi-planetary conglomerates, the CIA / NSA / Wall Street money printing, solar system wide economy riggers that control all data information, the consensus manufacturers. But it all happens within the center of power. It doesn't really go outside of that. And Neofeud 2 is a game that, and this is just a little sneaky, because my computer is being slow, so I got to make sure I use, every time I open a new tab today, my computer is, like modern empires, running low on resources. So the lights are a little bit glitching out. Lights are flickering in the US and in the collective resource war doer places. And so I have to make sure I get all the mileage I can. Don't forget to get Neofeud 1, which is on sale right now. This really does help us out to keep on doing streams, education, activism, finishing Neofeud 2. I'm very close to being done. I was working like all night yesterday on Neofeud 2. I'm making a huge war. It's a huge war, but it's not a war for resources. It's a war to end all resource wars. It is an armed struggle for collective liberation, and I was working. I'm trying to finish that. Trying to finish this game. So anyways, so do check out Neofeud 1 if you haven't yet. It really does help us out. And also, of course, if you want to learn about Neofeud 2, just one more little thing. You want to learn about what is happening with Neofeud 2, I made a video last week called Neofeud 2 and the State of Our Throne, where I was directly answering questions in this live stream of people who were wondering how is Neofeud 2 currently doing. And I might do that again if that seems like something that is interesting going forward. I'll try to look if there's any legit questions. I'm gonna be just kind of speaking for a bit, but then I'll look at the chat later on, because it seems like at one point we were getting a lot of really inappropriate, not very good chat at one point, but it seems like we mostly have cool people in the last recent history, so I'll try to do that more. Anyways, going forward, let us go back to what I was talking about. Back to your regularly scheduled Silver Spook. I'm not talking really loud nowadays. I'm a little bit calmer. I used to say I do jet engine decibel, high frequency, high velocity, education, not ranting. But I just it's not very high velocity. It doesn't need to be fast. It's over a long period of time, I suppose. Anyways, is war over resources human nature? So is war inevitable? Is another thing, right? Is like control over resources inevitable, right? Is the desire to control all the resources, whether that's lithium, whether that is electricity itself, whether that is gold, silver, fiat currency, control over whatever is the settlement or the international method of payment, right? That's important, right? To power itself is control over obviously fossil fuel like oil, natural gas, cobalt, rubber, silk, tea, copper, human resources, right? That's what the slaves come in. Slaves, as maximized slavery as possible, diseducated, unorganized workers. If you can't get away with that, racial disparities, racial differences to maintain a controlled, maximally abused, minimally paid workforce, right? So in that sense, racism itself is a resource that can be used to maximize your total collected gold, silver, such as the Spanish in Bolivia, right? Speaking of fallout, right? In Spain building its empire, right? The Romans gathered the slaves to then gather more wealth, right? Because the only difference between a Roman slave and a Roman worker is how much the Roman rulers, the Roman oligarchs, the Roman, ultra rich aristocrats with statues built for themselves. The only difference between a Roman slave and a Roman worker is how much they're going to pay and how much, how successfully they have controlled the population with some collection of ideologies, threats of violence. All of it is ultimately in the minds of all of the humans, right? Louis. I talked about Louis XIV on the Twitch stream last time. He called himself a sun god. Louis XIV of France. He called himself the sun god. He actually had himself constructed. He had like murals of himself. He had himself painted in a chariot carrying the Greek god Zeus's lightning bolt, surrounded by Roman soldiers, pushed by Hercules himself, like in his own palace. Right? He called himself the sun god. But this is about deification of the ruler of a resource warring a people who are they are in a doom loop, one might say, culturally and civilizationally, a people that is in a doom loop of believing that wars over resources and the conquest and enslavement and these things are inevitable and human nature. And so, but the people that run that need to deify themselves, right? And he had himself in Versailles, which was a palace which he moved the capital of France from, where he would be, where the nobility slash hereditary aristocracy slash feudal slash capital, because they're also the wealthiest people, capitalist groups, all moved. They were forced to move into Versailles, which was a small hamlet, and then he constructed this huge city, in part to control, to increase his control over the nobility, and one of the motivations was to preempt any attempt at revolution or any attempt at change, any uprising and assault on him, right? The Parisians would have to leave of Paris and they have to come all the way to Versailles if they wanted to try to change the system that they were in, which they were suffering, obviously, greatly, to pay for all of his lavish mega. And it's one thing to build beautiful monuments and such, right? Because many countries around the world, not just in the West, but have built, great structures. But it's one thing to build, but it's another thing to build an entire palace for yourself, a megaplex of tens of thousands of rooms, these hedge mazes, fountains, simply to aggrandize yourself personally, while everyone else outside is Jean Valjean, the Les Miserables out there, right? That's a different thing, right? Because there's many places that build great things, but these things should be shared. And the Great Wall of China was built, because there was violent invaders that they needed to deal with. There, when somebody builds a large structure like a electric power plant, like a solar or a hydropower plant, or a gas one, that's a large structure, but it benefits everybody, right? But when you build a palace simply with paintings of yourself as God, as the Son, right? In the Greek and Roman sense, and that's another thing where there's a direct lineage and continuation from those people, and those people that predated the Europeans, the post-Roman Empire Europeans, let's say, to the present, and they fudge many details, but they view themselves, especially the rulers in particular, as it's baked into their Versailles, right? It's literally on the walls, right? The American capital, right? It is the Greek and the Rome is like baked into it. You have Greco-Roman fluted columns, right? There's it's like the documents, they all harken back to this great Greece and great Roman democracies that built great empires. The style of the architecture, like the money, right? On the back of the money, it's literally the dollar sign is a denarius sign with a different Roman character. Right? It was an X with a line through it was the denar, and it's similarly the dollar, like the denarius, is an inflating fiat currency maintained through mass planetary military threat of total annihilation, which is what the Romans would do. If you didn't use their denarius, they would crush and destroy you, right? That's why you have to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? This is like Asian, African, Venezuela, Central South American countries being forced to use the US dollar. It's actually the same thing, right? So the military comes, when you threaten to get off the US dollar, especially post the petrodollar and unpegging the dollar to gold, that is when the U.S. really enters its like hyperpower stage. That is when the United States will come and crush and annihilate. They'll bomb your Venezuela, they'll sanction and starve 500,000 Iraqis, or they will assault they will try to annihilate Syria or Libya. They will come after any country that tries to change course and stop using its denarius. Right? I'm sorry, it's dollar. Dinero is anyway. Also, the control of resources, the control of the medium of exchange to get the resources, and then all of that backed by some kind of, if not military supremacy, the belief in the minds of the world in that military supremacy, right? Whether the U.S. has military supremacy actually is questionable. What really the what is in the minds of all the people at the end of the day, all of this stuff is all constructs. These are all ideas and thoughts in the minds of 8 billion people, or the people in the world, right? And they accept this narrative, this worldview, this matrix, this consensus reality manufactured from on high, right? Like the paintings, like the Louis paintings, act like the CNN, right? The priests or the pastors of the 1600s, right? Speaking is the New York Times and the Western so-called history books. So-called history books. I don't believe there are too many actual history books. Most of them are full of half truth and lies. But what you're taught in K to 12, liberal or conservative era code schools, right? Slightly different. Now they're kind of banning teaching anything. It's like Fahrenheit 451 in here, but not that it was very good before that. You don't really need to burn the books. You don't even need to remove them, as Zach De La Roca once said. All you got to do is just fill the books with half truths and lies where it really matters most, and people can read, and they can still be controlled. Obviously, they are, because there's still a war for resources to the detriment of American, Canadian, European, etc. populations. I mean, so you don't need to burn the books. It's actually counterproductive from an emperor's perspective. I mean, it's actually not very efficient. If you want to maintain war over resources, you want to maintain tranquility and the appearance of peace. Burning books, it becomes especially nowadays very obvious. I was just reading a little bit of Fahrenheit 451. Right? It's like if you just literally start removing books, and people can see that you're removing books, it gives people it's kind of like seeing blood on a statue, on a Greco-Roman statue at Columbia University. It gives you a sense of unease, like there might be something wrong with my society, my country, right? You don't want to burn your books. You want it very nice and peaceful. You want brunch to go without the ashes of books and the blood or fake blood, being thrown on you, because that's the best way to run an empire. It's very efficient. It worked for the last 70 years for America. They did a lot of killing. There's a lot of what's happening in the Middle East right now. That was happening nonstop for the last 7 years. The only difference between then and the 2023, since October 7th, is the ability to control the narrative, right, is falling apart. Mostly because of non-resource warring places that are kind of like, we don't want to keep doing that stuff. We'll make alternate methods, like we'll have alternate methods of mass communication that you don't control, basically, and we'll allow the truth to come through that. And so that's putting a damper on the ability for those who would like to keep making war over resources a so-called eternal inevitable norm. Is starting to cause problems for that, those people who would like to keep doing these kind of things, which is a good thing, because I mean, fighting wars over resources it's needless, it's bad, it's detrimental to your personal self-interest and the collective interest. It's bad for the environment. Everybody kind of knows that, but it's kind of like, it's an assumption that, fighting these wars isn't good, but we have to do it because if we don't do it, someone else will do it. War, it just happens. It's just, war is like, humans fighting war is like the sun coming up. We just have to keep doing it. It's like going to the bathroom. Like, you're going to pee. Like, you can hold your pee for a little while, an hour, 2 hours even, till you turn blue in the face and your bladder feels like it's on fire, and then you'll have to pee. It's just the worst going to happen. And like I'm not I'm not saying that, like, I think it's going to be hard to prove that it is or it isn't ultimately, right? But like, you should at least try. But then somebody will argue, what, trying to stop this system is so much effort. I could just go to brunch. I could just like have my TV and not be disturbed by. I could just be like Cypher in the Matrix. I could just like eat the steak. I could eat the steak at the brunch, and I could just be filled with joy. In one sense, like Kamala Harris's campaign, that's the current. She's gonna save the world, right? That's like, she's gonna really change everything, and the world's gonna get better. That's what America is the greatest country in the world, and its TV stations tell me that. The good party, the Democratic Party, just told me that. And so, like, but Kamala Harris is correct, and we have to thank Russia and Vladimir Putin for supporting and endorsing Kamala Harris, because that is really gonna give her a boost. That's gonna really help her get a lot, because she's really gonna change the world. Being from the she's definitely not from like the administration that is conducting wars over resources and committing, what do you call those things when you unalive a lot of babies? Anyway, so I mean, anyways, so 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 now that we know that, but Kamala Harris says, you can vote whoever you can do whatever you want with this American election. You can, but that is the Russian president to come out and say Kamala Harris, has a very interesting laugh, and we endorse her for president. So that's really nice. Anyways, so the Kamala Harris is running on joy, though. She did say joy. You should be filled with joy, right? And people who don't like us, they just hate our joy. That, like, I mean, what is she? I'm speaking is one of her quotes, right? Joy can be a strategy. Don't underestimate Harris's good vibes only campaign. Like, we only want good vibes. We only want joy. And the thing is, like, that is a good campaign for, the United States, because it is pleasure seeking, responsibility avoiding places. I mean, because, I mean, if you do look at the honest truth of what's happening in the world, I mean, it is difficult. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's right to look away from the horror that your country is responsible for, but I mean, this is why things like this exist, right? War doesn't change. These horrible acts, these empires, they don't change. There was Romans before. You got the slaves and wealth of Spain. They did conquistadoring all over Central South America and then all around the world. They had these the British and the French Empire, global colonial system, and now we have the United States and its system. What are you gonna do? Just have some joy. Just enjoy the good vibes. Enjoy the Roman gladiatorial circus. Just enjoy the Netflix and the enjoy your Rings of Power. Enjoy your Call of Duty. Where you can play games that simulate being in one of these front lines war zones, fighting for freedom and justice and stuff. So just enjoy your life. Not at the bottom of the planetary totem pole, because you could go a lot lower. I mean, if you really want, you could go to one of these, third world, S-hole countries, right? At least you're an American, right? That's really great thing to be. I mean, the thing is, it is better to, quality of life. I know this image is not necessarily making my point at the moment, but I mean, quality of life historically has been worse if you were like a North African, right, or a Roman slave, or like especially in the peripheries, right? If you were a Roman slave, like outside the Roman capital, not a Roman citizen, if you were a Greek slave, that was not as good as to be a Greek Hellenic man citizen, right? And so if you were just not doing as well, they would say, well, just be quiet and just be happy you were born where you were born. Enjoy the olive oil, enjoy the toga party, and be thankful you're not a slave. The Romans will say, enjoy. Okay, yeah, maybe we did some slaughtering around Central, Northern, and Western Europe. Okay, yeah, we raided and took a bunch of slaves in, Africa and West Asia. But just that's what's gotta happen. Just watch the Christians get fed to lions. Just turn on the TV and watch the Netflix, and just be filled with joy. I mean, that is the Western strategy, right? It does work. It has worked. That is the democratic strategy, right? And partially it's like, and we feel really bad about, these places that we have hurt, and we feel really sad and bad about that. And, if one day they adopt our democratic practices if Niger just adopts American democratic practices, I'm sure they'll be able to keep their uranium and stop living in extreme poverty while they send all of their resources to France and to us for free at gunpoint. Obviously, if you think about it too much and you're a little bit too intellectually honest, that all falls apart, and so it's like, okay, well, I'll just not think about it. If you actually are a rigorously empirical, rational person, you just have to go, well, I'll be rigorously empirical about being an electrician and science. I'll be rigorously accurate about this specific telescoped in subset of climate science when it comes to meteorological formations of clouds. Because that doesn't bother you. But if you actually there's no way to justify any of this stuff if you have any kind of thing slightly resembling a conscience, unfortunately, right? So then Lil Jon and the bread and Lil Jon is just a circus, and the $2 McDouble, I heard it was $3, they had to drop it down to $2. The $2 McDouble is the bread, that is how these places are run. Also, what's up to Nura, right? Oh yeah, didn't Obama already save the world? Indeed. I will try to get to the chat later on today, because it seemed like it was a good thing to do last time. Anyway, let me stick back. Let me get back to this. So, is war over resources human nature, though? I have not answered the question. I may never answer the question over the course of this. I may have only constructed that sentence as clickbait, or just to. I wanted it to be something that people were like, I wonder what the answer to that is, or some people who are like, I have the answer to that. I definitely have the answer to that. But yeah, so obviously what I'm trying to establish, I'm establishing that there is a history of this. There's a history of the belief in a whole variety of contexts that this is the case, or that people have believed this for reasons that have maintained their systems, right? It is a kind of copium, as they say nowadays, right? If you are from the United States, if you are from Europe, if you're from a country that is waging, right, this horrible, atrocity-filled war that we can all see. I mean, many people, not all, that many people can see. Some people put their fingers in the ears when they hear the names of the flower massacred children, right? Some people cover their eyes, and so maybe you can't see when you put your head in, when you cover your eyes, when you're coming out of the convention, you can't see the children who have died from the weapons you sent, so or sometimes corporate media, right, because I have family members that they're not seeing too much of this, but these are like older, family members. They watch mostly just the corporate media. Liberal, conservative, progressive, or otherwise, doesn't really matter. They're not showing much of it, right? But there's other people that are getting media from other information. Again, that's the main difference, is, right? Like, there could have been these mass protests over the last, mass actions over the last, and BDS as well, economic actions, right? This all could have been happening in the last 70 years, right? This could have been happening in the last 2,000 years. I mean, Romans could have risen up, Romans could have risen up. They didn't. Why? What makes the difference between people who tolerate mass atrocities, their own impoverishment to an extent, right? What? That's another question. Like, at what point do people change the wheel? At what point do people table flip the game? Even though, what causes that ultimately? That's a harder question. That is a question that is asked by many scholars, that can never fully be answered, probably. But like France did have, like, I talked about Louis. Louis the 14th, who built, the Sun King, who built the Versailles in the shape of, in the style of his predecessors, Greece and Rome, and the Italians and the Borgias, etc. He was actually jealous. Part of it was Louis was jealous of the Italians, who were the inheritors of the Roman power, right? Who had these lavish structures, beautiful fountains, right? They had great money and power, and they exuded it in their Italian Roman so-called fallen Roman Empire. In one sense, the Roman Empire never died. Like, Rome and the Catholic Church and Italy is still the Roman Empire. It just is like folded into a complex of imperial power that is the EU, and then ultimately the US, and the planetary, capitalist neo-colonial hegemony, etc. So Rome never did die. It didn't die. That's another. It's kind of, and once as it was, and it did much of it burned, etc., etc. And it was not exuding the scale of power that it did at that one time. But in another sense, it never died. It transmuted, it transformed, but it never died. In one sense, in terms of like passing the torch of a capitalist imperial system that insists on infinite wars for resource accumulation and control, right? That then results in mass disinformation and mind control that then continues the war, because without the money, the informational control that buys, and the bribing that's part of the control, bribing and rewriting textbooks and making people give speeches, right? That's the purpose of the priestly. Wherever there has ever been a Western church, has been a Roman Empire, and that's the informational distributional department. That has been the New York Times is just a descendant, right? The Western University. By another interesting important fact, the university system was never created for education, really, right? It was the continuation of the church, right? There's a direct line from like the priests and the pastors that were leading the populations, right, who were not allowed to read and to speak. They were the priests who were telling people, right, give us this day our daily bread, O King, who our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? And who is the emissary of God, the King, right? Well, that is being given to you, right, from your priest. And the university was not there to educate people. University was ultimately, right, its purpose is to make sure that people are indoctrinated into the new theology, right? It's called the Harvard economics department. It's called the Gaussian copula curve. All right, it's not, university is not there to educate. Western university is not there to educate. You might get some education accidentally, But that is actually what they initially they were in a time of some people starting to question ideals, mostly because there's actually other places in the world. One of them is this large Asian place that actually inspired the interesting thinkers of Europe, like Voltaire. Right? It was actually coming from the east to the west. It was not actually in the west. It wasn't actually coming from Rome and Greece. It was actually coming from outside the west, with a lot of silk and a lot of tea, and then Indian-grown narco was being sent back. Right? That's actually where the interesting ideas were coming from, and also from Turtle Island. Right? Like the Iroquois and the Six Nations Constitution. Right? It was not inside. Anyway. So, as Voltaire once said, does it not rest on the merit? Does not the greatness of the world's oldest, wisest 4,000-year-old civilization rest upon the Mandarins' merit, rather than the divine birthright of our great and adored King Louis XIV? That was actually Voltaire speaking about this king in France, right? He said, like, you are the best, O God, O Sun King, O holder of Zeus's lightning bolt, O Caesar, commander of the legions of France, O great Louis XIV. I kneel at your feet, I kiss thine toes, I kiss thine ring. But does not China, that's what he said, this 4,000-year-old wiser civilization, offer the antidote to Western illusory historicity, also known as lies, and the merit of their system, rather than the hereditary aristocracy and vast quantities of wealth that give you? And then, but he was trying to be nice, and and in the free European great free world, he was put into the stocks and pilloried and exiled. Anyway, so so the money gives you the power to, the money gives you the, it has been, and it historically, and it continues. The money, each of these things is like a part of a hurricane, right? Without warm water, right? Cold, super cool, like tropospheric air, and certain patterns in the surrounding regions, you don't have a hurricane, right? When a hurricane begins, right? When the vortex begins, it can be difficult to stop, right? And as long as it has the resources of the warm ocean and the super cool stratospheric air, right, it can continue to power this very destructive vortex. It's very powerful hurricane. It spans thousands of miles. It can level houses. A Category 5 hurricane will wipe out billions and billions of dollars of damage very quickly to a huge swath, like of space, and like systems of humanity that are premised on mass resource accumulation, mass disinformation, propaganda, brainwashing, indoctrination, and mass controlled violence to maintain that, right? Once you get all those three things together, right? Large military force, the brain, you can have some of one and the other. Each one of those three pillars feeds the other. Huge quantities of this accumulation, right, that you can then use to control dissent and change and control the minds of the masses. You need to pay the military at the front line a bit of a premium to keep doing that. The more your informational control, right, the more brainwashed the population is, then the less money you need to pay them totally in real time to keep them going out. They'll work for less to go to the front line, right? Like in the United States, that's why the U.S. actually prefers, the U.S. empire prefers very brainwashed, far-right extreme countries closer to their enemies, right? Like in Germany, or like in South Korea, or like in Taiwan, right? They want to brainwash people or in the East Turkestan Islamic movement, the ISIS, right? They want extreme people, very extremists that are like more dyed in the wool about destroying a particular people, right? They don't have to pay as much money, right? Like Blackwater got a lot of bad, Blackwater. I mean, it's not a good organization. It was the mercenary guns for hire. What's his name? Eddie Prince. I forget the leader of it. It then transformed into XZ. It was like the private death squad, right? American and Western military crews are going to be more expensive, right? Because I will go to a country, I will overthrow their country so that you can steal the resources or start a war in that country for money. But you're gonna have to pay me personally as an American soldier or as an American mercenary. You're gonna have to pay me more money than an extremist already in that country. You have to pay the transportation fees. You don't have to, right? And it's somebody who really believes that every Russian or every Chinese has to be wiped out, or every Palestine has to be wiped out, or every African or Asian or Latin American, someone who really believes, right, in this war, a far right, like a Chris Kyle. Oh, he's American, but some people will more willingly go out and fight, and then it requires less. So you do more brainwashing, more information, mind control. Then you don't have to do as much money control, because there's people will naturally just keep going out and dying for you, or killing people for you, for your empire, right? For your modern Roman Empire. The Romans engaged in all of that kind of thing too, right? Like that's how they brought people in, and they would divide and conquer. They would go to places, right? They would tell half the population. They would find where is the dividing point. They tried to do that to the Basque. They failed, and the Basque but they tried to break the Basque, who are the indigenous people still. One of few indigenous people still remaining in Spain that were never colonized by the Romans. The rest of Europe is mostly Romanoid in that sense. That's why they're all in NATO. So the Basque blew up the Spanish fascists in the 20th century. They sent him into orbit nearly by blowing up his car. When much of the rest of Spain was, I don't know. I guess we'll go along with whatever's happening here. It's kind of like today, like what's happening in Germany. Well, we got, the right marching, far right marching. We're doing Hitlerian crimes. Well, I guess we'll just do that then, just like in the 40s. We got the collective West is just basically doing that. But anyway. But the Romans back in the day in Spain did the same thing, right? They would divide they would go into an area. They would go, these people have X and Y beliefs. These people have a grudge. This side of the river has a grudge against the other side. That's actually part of Game of Thrones. It's the Riverlands are full of all these little grudges. It's based upon historical European, like 1,000-year-old grudges between places. The Romans would go and exploit that and be like, if you work for us and you slaughter the other side, or we will arm you to exact revenge on your older begrudged area, and then once that happens, you're already divided. Then the Romans come through, and okay, well now we conquer everything, right? Now, of course, in the short term, the people that get brainwashed into believing that the Romans care about you. It's like the United States telling Japan, dump nuclear toxic waste, do what we say, and everything will be good for you, right? It's like telling Europe, sacrifice all of your economic and energy interests for our DC benefit, and then things will work out for you, even. And these Europeans should know better because they gave birth to America. It's like telling any country, Ukraine, everything's going to be really awesome for you. If soon, right? Like Lindsey Graham just said, soon, all of you Ukrainians, we're going to have trillions of dollars worth of Russian resources. Remember that? It's really great because this is like, now we all know it's a brief ounce of daylight in an eternal darkness that is the Western world. You got to leave it to the Republicans, to just spell it out, Lindsey Graham met up with Volodymyr Zelensky, and said, "This is really great. The war in Ukraine is going amazingly. You just need a little more support, and then we're going to beat Russia, and then all of those trillions of dollars of oil, gas, minerals, uranium, and then lots of slaves and lots of mail order wives that I'm going to buy, just like Donald Trump and Democrats also do. That's a lot of women. There's a lot of femoid resources for me and my friends to get. Ukraine is actually one of the highest rates of women abuse and women trafficking. It's actually like Mila Jovovich wasn't trafficked. She has a close relationship with her mom, who actually lives in was living in Ukraine, doesn't live there anymore. Lives in Russia, but there's a lot of resources to get. I mean, he made it very clear. Washington wants Ukraine's resources. He just came up and he said, Ukraine is sitting atop $1 trillion worth of minerals, and so the U.S. aid must keep flowing, right? I'm sorry if you thought it was about freedom and democracy and human rights for the Ukrainian people. I don't know if you know this, but I don't know if you do you know how the United States operates? I'm sorry if you don't know this. But do you know how your Rome operated? Do you know how France and Britain operated? Do you know how the US operated? Do you think the United States was in Vietnam to liberate the Vietnamese people? Or to reestablish colonialism and get free, cheap silk tea and copper and stop the spread of communism, which is what General Douglas MacArthur directly said, who was commanding that war, by the way. Do you believe the United States cares about democracy? I'm sorry if you're coming late to this party, but So, and if you think that the United States suddenly changes policy when it starts a new war because you consumed a lot of Western media and you believe it, right? That is completely owned and operated. even if it's not Western corporate media, if it's media that is created by someone who has been mass consuming corporate media, which includes the history books and all the Western books. I mean, it's a very hard problem to solve because virtually almost everything that you can consume and read of anything, right? With the extent of maybe mathematics, right? 2 + 2 = 4. You can't steal resources and control people's minds by changing that. It doesn't make sense, right? The United States could manufacture consent that says 2 + 2 = 5, but it doesn't help control lithium and oil and force people to use the dollar. Right? If you say 2 + 2 = 5 doesn't make any difference for the resources, right? Now, if you believe that America is fighting for freedom and democracy in Ukraine and not for trillions of dollars of Russia's resources, right? Then that suddenly people will sign up to go, right? People will cannon fodder, like in Rome, right? Rome deceiving people to go cannon fodder themselves for the resources, right? America can do a Rome, can do a Caesar, and get people to go cannon fodder themselves in Ukraine. They can take all the money they have and they can throw it into Ukraine, believing they're going to liberate people. I mean, for the people that have want to be good people, moral people, they're more they're more quote unquote the bleeding heart, right? Or they're trying to be good people, but they're not realizing what's happening necessarily, or they want to seem like good people. That's the liberal. They're going to put money in there. They're going to send some of their paycheck. They're going to donate money to that. Just like they donate money to American presidential campaigns, believing it will make a difference. I am once again asking you for all the money you got, broke American, so that I can keep doing a GENOCIDE. It has never been more important to keep. Just think of it like this. I am once again, AOC is asking you, Kamala Harris is asking you for $5 so she can help steal $1 trillion of resources on the back of 1 million dead people. I mean, that's what you're giving money to. I'm sorry. That's what you're giving money to. I'm sorry to have to pull off the Band-Aid like that. But I mean, that's what it is. I mean, because people can kind of get, oh yeah, we have these huge countries and there's these empires and they're taking people's resources and doing wars and enslaving people and it's terrible. And oh man, it just keeps happening. But okay, so if it just, but this is the Western, like, quantum, Heisenberg's uncertainty Western brain. It's like the wavical brain. Like so does war never change, and we're currently still in a state of mega empires that are going around the world committing atrocities, taking resources, right? Because because this is the thing, right? Somewhere, Westerners, Americans, Europeans, they know that that's what's happening, because otherwise this doesn't work. Because no, empire's done. We would never hurt a fly. We're a just, democratic, world peace bringing America. Freedom and democracy, unicorn, everything good is coming to the world. And accidentally, we might accidentally, have to, get into a few scuffles here and there, but it's just minor. It's very minor. It's not very much. And it was mostly their fault anyway. We're just trying to defend freedom and democracy and global prosperity. And look at all these, we're helping Africa. I just donated 30 cents of my $50 Starbucks coffee to some African child. I'm donating to this one child somewhere in Arab world. We're like really moral, upstanding, good people, right? But if you really believe that, then this doesn't work. So I think actually but this is kind of the natural schizoid, quantum Western brain, right? That it compartmentalizes all these bits of reality. Alternate realities have to exist in one American mind. To be a British is to have the British Empire and the height and the ultimate power, in one half of your brain, and like, we're a sad, cold, wet rock where the cheeky Nandos are unaffordable. You like, it's just you have to be. It's like, it's brain damage basically. Because if you actually believe that you are a place of peace, democracy, and freedom, and all these things, right? That you can't believe that, and also believe that, well, we can never stop this ever war and ever resources, and it's just going to keep happening, right? Because then you what you're saying is, right, oh, it's already stopped and it's done, and now we have the rules-based order, so, but it's kind of like having the cake and eating it too, which is another characteristic of this, right? It's like you want to, I want to have the spoils of war and atrocity and empire. I want to live in the capital of Rome, and I want to live in the capital of Rome, built by slaves in the blood of dead, of massacred peoples, innocent peoples. I want to live in the capital and benefit from their labors and their stolen resources. But I also want to feel good about myself and go to sleep at night, and I want to not feel bad about it, right? That's. So the empire is always in a struggle, right? It's always in a struggle to give people maximum comfort, right? The circus is more, the circus is not just about distracting the Roman population to stop them from overthrowing their unjust capitalists and imperial and eagle-wearing rulers, much like America. The Aquila was a symbol of the Roman, and it was also the symbol of the American eagle, right? The symbol. So but it's not just about distracting with the circus and the bread, right? The circus is also there to stop the Roman from thinking about what they have done, what they are part of, right? Is to keep people titillated, but it also has to give people a false sense of morality, right? Or at least distract them so they don't think about their own complicity in crimes, right? Like the liberals sticking their fingers in their ears at the Democratic National Convention, as as the Palestine activists are like, right, reading out the names of the children they've killed, right? They're like, where is my Roman circus? I need to get back to my circus. I need to, like, maybe we can get like Beyonce and Lil Jon to drown out the names of the dead people at the fringes, the people that pay the blood that pays for our brunch, right? Maybe we can get Lil Jon and Barack Obama dancing with Beyonce to drown out the knowledge of the crimes that we have committed to get this, right? So the challenge that's the current struggle right now in America, right? It is the people. It is in the empire itself, in the Colosseum. There are people that are trying to stop the circus. They are like standing up in the bleachers in the Roman circus, right? Right, literally interrupting speeches, right? That's why Kamala Harris is like, I'm speaking, right? It's like Caesar going, hey, I'm watching the Christians get eaten by lions, right? Caesar is speaking now. Do not interrupt the circus. Don't interrupt the imperial distractions, right? And so this, every time there's a brunch and somebody's getting interrupted, the college, right? Columbia College, just had that blood thrown all over the campus, right? One of many things that has happened, right? But they, in Hins Hall, right? Or is it the statue? So I can find that. Yeah, the kids came back to school to discover, like if you look at Columbia University, like this is again, right? This is just this is the Americans that, like the French, are redecorating themselves, like because the wreath, right? That wreath is a Roman symbol of victory. It's the wreath on the head of the statue in Columbia University here in the Big Apple of New York City of the United States of America. That is the symbol of mass atrocity, right? You put the wreath after you went and you murdered millions of people, or thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, right? And you stole all their resources and you enslaved huge quantities. The Romans leader will come back and put a wreath on like that. It's a symbol of evil. Like it's like the Emperor Palpatine cloak, the thing she's holding, that is a implement of death. Like the fluted column of Columbia University is a direct Greco-Roman architecture in order to make Americans feel closer to their imperial warmonger, ghoulish ancestors, right? Elon Musk remember that one is everybody's like, how often do you think about Rome? How often do you think about Rome? But you have to think about Rome, right? You have to think about Rome. You have to think about it all the time. You have to be Roman all the time, right? Especially when you're the leaders, right? This is what, even Star Trek can't escape that, right? It's like James Tiberius Kirk. I mean, they got all they think about is the Romulans, because the West aspires, it has to keep aspiring to be that, while simultaneously pretending. Well, it's simultaneously being like, well, we're also super democratic and equal and just, right? And the thing is, like, you have to cloak yourself with the Greek democracy cloak comes back and go like, well, we were just like those Greeks. The Greeks with enslaved women and people of color, and slaves and oligarchy. We're just like that, right? And so you have to come back with the democracy. Go like, well, we have votings though, and those other peoples, they don't have the votings. So when people they're throwing their blood is disrupting the circuses. So it is the struggle, or the real struggle is, like, in one sense, is a struggle to get people decircumcised, not decircumcised. You can't really do that. You can't really bring that back. But to remove the circus that distracts people so they can see, the truth shining through, the blood all over themselves. Like the naked lunch, a very high on many drugs, Burroughs wrote this book. It's very disturbing. You don't have to read it, but the naked lunch that's on the end of every fork. And when you can see the naked lunch, right, that is soaked in blood, you suddenly don't want to eat it as much. But as long as you don't see it, you can keep eating the blood-soaked lunch. As long as you don't see how, as Hillary Clinton said, the sausage is made, you can keep eating that sausage, right? And the sausage is made of people, right? Like Soylent Green, right? But it's like, so now the struggle is, well, what if it's nothing to do with what is right and what is wrong. It's nothing to do with what is rational, what is irrational. It's nothing to do with argument and logic, right? This is this false Western assumption that people operate based upon logic, and certainly Western people operate based upon logic and right and truth and empirical research, and this is a bunch of metaphysical nonsense. Is not supported by history. So the Western mind operates based upon how frequently during their day are they bombarded with X or with Y. If they're bombarded with one story most of their day, they'll go with that. If they're bombarded with the other one, they'll go with that. You know, right? Because you can choose. Do you want to be living in truth, stopping GENOCID, or do you want to have joy and brunch with Kamala? You can choose that until somebody makes you, and usually people choose joy. You know, people choose how can I say that without getting censored in the so-called free speech West? The people will choose GENOCIDE joy, right? When people went to brunch, when people just did their lives during the Iraq War in the 2000s, more people died in Iraq than in PALESTINE in the last year. It's 1 million or more, right? There's many war, not just Iraq. There's like Iraq, Afghanistan. People were going to brunch all the 2000s, right? Not everybody, but most people, right? In the 1990s, there was all kind of horrible wars all over the world, especially in a lot of Europe. In the 1970s, there was Vietnam, right? In the 1950s, there's Korea. I mean, there's every single year there's been a war or more, right? And people just chose joy every time, or most of the West just every time chooses the joy, right? So the game now is like, how do you get people to be forced to stop choosing to celebrate the blood-filled, complicit, blood covered brunch food and choose the truth, right? That's really the what's the struggle. Anyway, that's more like, how do you deal with changing these kinds of systems? I mean, not to say that like that's a guaranteed solution. We don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, maybe this will stop, maybe it won't. But Vietnam was the last time that there was like a large number of people that were like they were actively trying to do at least something, right? The many college campuses were erupting to try to stop wars, right? To control the world's resources. Because the war in Vietnam, to stop the spread of communism, but that is about maintaining colonialism, imperialism, to control, supporting the Southern Vietnamese capitalist, U.S.-backed, the Three Stripe, fascists, etc. And our good friend Luna Oy can tell you more about that, a Vietnamese content creator. And to control resources by maintaining that, to stop the spread of actually equally distributing resources to everybody. It's called the opposite of capitalism. It starts with a C, and it rhymes with Baumeianism. Anyway, something other than the imperial system that is what is maintaining all of this, right? So people, to her credit, I mean, at least the Green Party and Jill Stein have been supporting, because Jill Stein was at like with many other people, the Jane Fondas and many other groups they were out in the street at the college campuses to stop the Vietnam War. They're at the Vietnam War protests. They understood what Malcolm X and Martin Luther King said before they were. I think Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were democratically elected out of existence, right? I guess the Americans chose very democratically to spill their brains all over the place, right? And the United States elected, so the American population all voted, right, for the U.S. government to get rid of JFK, right? That's how democracy works. It's like again, like you can't. The American and the Western brain is a nonsense place. It doesn't make any sense. People that believe in it, you have to have like a gnat, fruit fly lifespan, a fruit fly lifespan, or a fruit fly length attention span. Memory. Your memory can't be. You have to be like the guy in Memento. Another science fiction movie. Who forgets everything that's happened in the last like 10 minutes. The next 10 minutes is a new 10 minutes, right? Because if you have a memory that's longer than a fruit fly, and you are even remotely, intellectually honest and like empirically rigorous, then everything falls apart, right? So, as I've stated before, you can't really learn history, economics, and politics actually in a rigorous manner and not come to the conclusion. And it is a devastating conclusion that everything that you exist in and the systems and the country and many people around you are complicit in the most horrible things in the world. And it's and then so you get kind of shocked. You can get shocked out of that and just retreat. Try to forget that you learned those things. That's what like the Truman Show and the Matrix and these shows are about. These sci-fi shows are about, right? Or also what the Naked Lunch is about. It's like, if you do what you were eating, you would stop eating it. So it's better to just. So for many people, just say, well, it's better to just like not. Learn to stop worrying and love the bomb-filled, body part-filled sausage. Anyway, so okay, so I gotta finish soon. So it's war over resources and human nature. So ultimately, though, I don't think it is, right. I don't think it is. I've been talking around that question, not dealing directly with it. I don't think that it is. Most of humanity, in fact, like most of the 90% of humanity, have not been people who sought to control all the resources for a tiny minority of people's benefit, right? Much of the Americas, like on the left side of this picture, right? You have like the peoples that not this is obviously I'm not gonna say what this picture is. I want people to like think about this picture. Why are certain areas brown and black and red, and other areas are like more pristine, green, environmentally positive, sustainable, healthier places, right? Why did I choose these areas, right? Or why is this picture like this? What would result in this? But much of the native people in the United States before, the colonial era, when Native Americans were systematically wiped out, denationalized, their languages and cultures banned, all the most heinous things you could possibly imagine done to them. African people were stolen from their native land and brought to be slaves in the United States, which is how they built all their wealth. Right, and the people of the Native Americans and Central and North and South Americans, like all like mostly coexisted with each other, and contrary to Western so-called history, they actually had large advanced cities. Like Cahokia is one of many actually. Tenochtitlan is another place that was very organized place. The Inca and in the southern hemisphere, they had like roads that had wagon transport. They had like very they're very advanced technologies and organizations of their societies and civilization, and like there was not no battle, there was not no warring, but it was not nowhere near to the scale of like things that happen in places like Rome and Europe and Greece, and obviously to an extent there was an explosion in the during the Khans, right, across all of the Eurasian continent, and that quickly died down. And there has been fights across the world. It's not like it's limited to Greece, Rome, Britain, France, Spain. But the vast majority and the dominant and the most advanced forms, the most virulent forms of human culture, human civilization, lifeways that involve mass control over money, over information, narrative, and then this kind of hurricane system that is self-feeding, this self-sustaining downward spiral of mass money and power accumulation, mass militarized militant culture, and resulting in all these horrible atrocities, accumulation of money, and then more accumulation of mass quantities of money, and then more disinformation, more war for resources, and then more money. Right? You see how it can keep sustaining itself, right? So the U.S. is just kind of the center of a 2,500-year-old hurricane, depending on how you count. Right? It just never stopped. Right? The hurricane moved. Just one thing you can think of the hurricane kind of like, where was the center? Right? You could argue whether Athens, exactly is where exactly is it. You could say, well, it's like more like a tropical depression. It was more like a Mediterranean depression. It was a Western depression. It wasn't quite a storm yet. By the time you got to Rome, it was definitely a storm. But the Greeks did have oligarchic structures, and they did do like credit default swap level of financial Wall Street speculation on the shipments of wine and olives and ships across the sea. In Game of Thrones, it actually comes up when they talk about the people across the sea, in the narrow sea, where your bloodline is less important than how much money you have, right? And that's something that goes way back. And like the bloodline and the power through like what's called like just generally very vaguely called like a feudalistic system. Versus the money control capitalistic system. There's no exact one point where one starts and one begins, even though it's kind of spoken about in that way, if it's ever spoken about in the Western world. But like by the time you got to Rome, there was definitely a hurricane going. Like it was a tropical storm, it was a Mediterranean storm, and it was a Western storm, and it was a Western hurricane. Right? There was huge amounts of money coming in that was going to the center into the Roman coffers. All these denarius coming in, right? Staple it even had a world reserve currency. It had a known world reserve currency at that time, and you had to pay in denarius. It would come into the coffers. The money would go to pay the diseducators, the Roman intelligentsia who would talk to the world. They would make up narratives and stories. They would go in. The Roman CIA would go in and divide and conquer and color revolution. Certain parts of what is now called Europe or Africa. Divide and conquer, try its best to, right? It's like the Basque region was like the Cuba. It was like America's today Cuba, this bastion of communist anti-colonial resistance that refuses to be controlled by America or Cuba, right? You spend so much money. 700 times they tried to kill Castro, never got it, never did it, right? It's right next to America, right? The Basque people are like the mountain island that was right next to Rome, very close to Rome. Right, but they could never fully crush them people because they were just for whatever reason historically. Some of it's Cuba is a literal island. That's another thing. But there's other islands that have been crushed too. And so the Romans would never. They tried many times to crush all the peoples of Europe, and the Basques continue to like pride themselves on that, and they should. But the Basque region has the largest worker cooperative, which is an anti-capitalist entity that it's not based upon. CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, boards of directors that are chosen by the world's oligarchies, the world's transnational elite, that's the richest people basically who own shares, right? So the area in the world in Europe that has like the highest concentration of like an anti-capitalist, most equal society is the place that was least that evaded or fought back against the hurricane of mass disinformation, mass violence, and mass money and resource accumulation, right? And it's like the hurricane, like when hurricanes come to Hawaii, they tend to not go over the island. We're on this big island. The hurricanes can't go over this island. It's literally because its altitude is like 15,000 feet. So the largest mountain in the world is Mauna Kea. And they just can't go over that. So it's kind of like there's just some places the empire have trouble going over. They just can't do Cuba, especially not since the Cuban Revolution. They just can't do it anymore, And there's other way bigger places than that. Bolivia is another place where the Spanish Empire they did harm many of them, but 60% of Bolivia is also Bolivia and Peru in that area. Bolivia is 60% indigenous, and today they also are leading. They have the world's highest economic, in terms of poverty alleviation, in terms of environmental, maintenance, in terms of like education, healthcare, all those kinds of things. Bolivia leads, right? They also were extremely mountainous area that the Spanish and colonizers had difficulty getting to. Anyway, these are facts of history that are, but when I talk about like when it gets going, right, the system, they really spin, and then it spun from Italy, throughout Europe. At one point, like the headquarters capital was the Dutch in the Netherlands, right? Especially during when they had the Dutch East India Company. They were a colonial leader. Like obviously Italy, Portugal, Spain during the conquistador era. Spain took huge swaths of the planet. That's why you have hundreds of millions of people speaking Spanish in Central South America and around the world. And then, of course, obviously Britain and France, right, became like London and Paris became like the hurricane center of the system. And of course, today, after World War II, all of the Western powers, this kind of these confluence of they're like mini hurricanes that are fighting each other. Well, they were together. All the European colonial powers made a planetary mega hurricane of war over resources, death, destruction, disinformation. But then they all blew each other up to a large extent, and the U.S. said, "Well, we'll become the new center of the hurricane." So today, the hurricane center of planetary imperial, mass annihilation, to again sucking the warm air of. If the resources are like the warm moist ocean, right, and the super cooled air is like the weapons of death and destruction, right, made from the resources. The United States is the current center of that hurricane, and in particular, D.C. Most Americans are like, most Americans don't even know what the hell is happening at all, ever. Unfortunately, most of them don't have any idea how their country actually operates. If they do, it's not that many. Because if all of them knew, the U.S. would probably be changed by now. If they do, a lot of them are just like, well, I don't care. I just like, I know that America is bad, but I just like joy. I like McDouble, I like Netflix. So, I like having, I want all of Russia's resources, I mean, not everybody. Most people would be like, are we really going around the world stealing resources and creating more weapons to destroy the world some more and steal more resources? People the average American probably will feel a little bit sad about that. Some of them are like, let's let's take all of Russia's resources. Let's take Africa's resources. Let's blow up and kill everyone and enslave them and all around the world and take all the resources, right? Some people are just like, yeah, Rome was awesome, man. And I think about Rome and I think, wow, that was awesome. That was super awesome. I think about the Spanish era and their empire, and I just want to wear gold cloaks, I want to be like Louis XIV and just walk around and I want people to paint pictures of me like I'm God, That would be awesome, right? Most people, that's why Disney movies exist, so that you can glamorize the colonial era's royalty, right? And you can want to be a princess or a prince. And America is just longing to return to mask off imperial mass evil. That's what Disney really is. Anyways, so you can be Louis. I'm sorry, the Tangled Princess. Anyways, is war over resources human nature? I don't think it is. And one other way to look at this is from a Hawaiian perspective. I'm just gonna go quick Hawaiian history lesson. This is actually part of why I decided to choose that. Is in Hawaii, in fact, did you know we had a system that was very, very good, and it did not involve mass accumulation and control of the resources. In fact, did you know that the U.S. Power Company greed and climate change drives blackouts, fires, and profits. Remember that Hawaii had renewable, non-privatized electricity before Caucasian capitalist William Howe plotted with the United States federal government to overthrow Hawaii, replace hydro with dirty fossil fuel, and charge through the roof for power. In 1891, William Howe became the first president of Hawaiian Electric Company and was, by his own account, deeply involved in the coup against the Hawaiian government. That was against private capitalist electricity. So several things are happening there. Number one, the Hawaiian government, so you could actually there's a Sierra Club history of Hawaiian Electric. You can read even more about this in Hawaii. Yeah, how Hawaiian Electric powered the illegal overthrow. So in fact, control over speaking of resources, right? Speaking of resource control, controlling electricity and power itself, right? Energy was one of the major reasons why Hawaii was overthrown by the United States illegally. And you can read all of that here if you want to learn more about that. But just in short, Hawaii, the Hawaiian government prior to 1890s and the U.S. intervention had very low cost electricity. It was subsidized by the government. It was basically when it first was established, it was basically essentially free, like nearly free. In 1888, then Princess Kaiulani here in Hawaii used the hydropower to light electric street lamps in Honolulu. Given Hawaiian Electric's long history of dependence on imported fossil fuels, it is worth noting that the first illumination of a public space in Hawaii's largest city came from a renewable source. This is actually from the Hawaiian Electric. From the Sierra Club article. So, in fact, Hawaii already had renewable power in the 1800s, right? And it was one of the first like large scale renewable power plants in the world, right? Hawaii was actually leading the world in renewable technology. And not only that, it was also not privatized, like I said. Also, the sugar plantation owners were also jeopardized. They were trying to import as many laborers that they could control as best as possible. And the Hawaiian government, they actually tried to bring in Norwegians, who were actually called at one point like the China Swedes, and they were like they were kind of looked down upon at one point. And actually, Liliuokalani, like they came very sick when they arrived. These plantation would-be plantation workers, and the Liliuokalani actually was like appalled by that and was like, why are these people being brought in to work on these plantations like in this like terrible treatment with this, they're gonna have this terrible. It's interesting because it's actually Scandinavians that are being like supported by a Hawaiian leader saying these are going to be exploited plantation laborers. They're already terribly ill and sick because of the way they're being shipped very abusively, right? And she ordered all of these plantation workers to be sent back to like Norway. They had to be treated and healed from their illness, and then they had to be sent back, right? And these are oligarchic American conspiring, basically white guys, trying to develop a capitalistic system, which also, part of that was they wanted to control the resources of electricity, right? And not allow it benefit the masses of the people under a, essentially it's like socialist, it's like the modern socialized electrical grids of places like Cuba and places like other places that you can imagine in the world that are not capitalist in that sense. So because the United States, United States, the colonial Western world, of course, as I said, the U.S. wasn't the center of the hurricane at the time, but the United States was engaging in the 1890s. It was like the Empire State became the Empire State. The Empire State building was because the United States was aspiring to empire status. Some people say the U.S. is at the end of its empire because it's 250 years old, right? It's actually false. The United States empire is a lot younger than that because it was established, yes, in the late 1700s. But the United States only really started to aspire to really be an empire on the scale of a Britain or a France, right? It didn't have the capacity to. It could only really aspire to that later into the late 1800s. So it's only really been 130 years, because it's really when the U.S. started, it went through the Spanish-American War, colonizing the Philippines, right? Fighting in the Philippines with Roosevelt carrying his big stick around the world. But this is about the United States openly aspiring to empire, right? The United States, right? in Hawaii was one of the examples. We can crush Hawaii. We can crush Philippines. We can take Puerto Rico. We can take islands. We can run around the world and be a European power, right? Right. And the thing is, the Europeans mostly laughed, and then eventually, like, well, I mean, we could use this United States with us. We work together. U.S. can help us control Asia and the Pacific because it's closer, basically. And then the Europeans fought each other, blew themselves up, and the U.S. said, well, now we run everything. But it's important to remember that, in fact, that Hawaii was a challenge to that system of resource control. One of many, right? Or control of resources, and then wars to make it is about we should develop our country using our resources, the resources we have here. We should not Hawaii also, all of this you see built here, Hawaii was not developed on the back of another country. Hawaii was developed internally with the work of the people in Hawaii. With knowledge was gained from around the world. Yes, people studying global human technologies. So Hawaiians read all kinds of books. We're the most literate place in the world. But Paris was built off of stolen wealth from Africa and Asia and around the world, right? So Versailles was also built with slave labor and stolen wealth from around the world. DC was literally built by slaves. Wall Street also. London was built plundering everywhere in the world, right? But Hawaii was not. That's the difference. And there's other countries in the world that have built successfully their countries and their infrastructure and their because infrastructure is very important to all this. Without infrastructure, you don't have anything, right? That's how do you keep Africa underdeveloped? How do you keep Central South America poor? Right? They're not right. As was it Parenti that said they're not underdeveloped, they're overexploited, right? But also by extension, but how do you develop without exploiting others, right? And there's a country that is leading in that, and I'm gonna talk about that at this moment. But Hawaii was the model for that, right? In fact, Hawaii developed itself and became an advanced country without Hawaii didn't send out to another country and go, I'm gonna colonize you here. And we're going to take Hawaii didn't go to Philippines, take Filipinos and say, you're going to build our country for us, right? So that was disturbing. Like Hawaii was disturbing because there was racial equality and Hawaiians did develop. There were African full citizens. There were Asian full citizens. There were people from around the world. There were white citizens of Hawaii too. And this disturbed the Europeans and Americans to their core because it was unprecedented that you would have an actual racially equal place that could develop electricity, high quality cities. Hawaii had electricity before the White House. And you could, all of these, number one, racial equality, that was abhorrent because the colonial system, all of the Europeans and West's and U.S. wealth was based on racism and colonialism. And Hawaii was doing it Hawaii was building its infrastructure without doing that. And it was doing it under a racially equal system, right? Everything about this was just horror to the descendants of the Roman hurricane, right? They were like, no, we have to fight wars of resources, conquest, colonize and subjugate, enslave. We have, right? You're like, no, look, humans never change. Humans, we don't change. We do wage war to gather slaves, we gather wealth, and then we build statues of ourselves and these fancy cities that fall apart after 5 minutes, Nowadays, the buildings don't last very long. Then with Spain, and we went around the world. We gathered wealth, and we oppressed certain people and not others. And then we built some tacky cities and some palaces for some feudal elite. And then Britain, and then France, and then America, and then that's how it goes. That's how it goes. But Hawaii was like, no, we don't have to do that. I mean, Hawaii was not the only place, but Hawaii in the 1800s, Hawaii was a place that it leapfrogged the Europeans without being a colonizer. Now, it wasn't very big, but it's still as an example. And Hawaii was an example. There were Africans that went to Africa and they said, hey, we should think about doing this in different parts of Africa. Asians were inspired. In fact, Sun Yat-sen, he went back to Asia and he said, Asians, we should have state-owned and operated for the masses infrastructure and electricity. We should have cooperative ownership for all enterprises that cannot be reasonably controlled and operated for the people by the state, and our centralized socialized medicine. Like Hawaii had the world's first universal healthcare system, and then third, we should have equality for all people in Asia, and we should have seek equality amongst all nations. Hawaii was the third neutral country in the world, right? Actually, the second after Switzerland. But after the Europeans established neutrality, Hawaii became the second neutral country as a possible political existence, as opposed to allied to one or the other empires, right? What Southeast Asians are, a lot of countries around the world are trying to get out of the wars, right? That idea of neutrality was pioneered by Hawaii ultimately, because Switzerland is a complicated. Hawaii was actually internationally on the geopolitical stage a new way forward, right? In a geopolitical sense, on top of a resource distribution sense, on top of racial equality sense, on top economically, in all senses, it was a new thing. And this terrified the Europeans. It wasn't just the Americans. The Europeans and all colonialists wanted to destroy Hawaii. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we find receipts that, the Britain and France offered all kind of backup assistance, like military and financial assistance. I don't have the receipts on that, but when they would have been in the same way the United States backed France in maintaining Vietnam as a colony, and then once they lost it, the U.S. went in to try to reassert. Right, it's the inter-hurricane dominance. Right, if France loses it, somebody has to control, right, the subjugated people for the Roman complex. Somebody has to, because when you, right, if anybody gets an inch on the global plantation, the slaves might take a mile. Right, that's right. That's why they did that. And so Hawaii was like, the slaves are getting like miles. Literally, African slaves who arrived in Hawaii became free, like Moses Allen, the first black person black businessman in the 1700s. At the birth of America, there were black businessmen in Hawaii who built bowling alleys, the first across island roads and hospitals for sailors, right? Because it was Moses Allen was a seaman who was a sailor at sea, and after he escaped enslavement in America, and then he resided in Hawaii, where he married a Hawaiian woman, Alani. He had a Hawaiianized name, Alani, and he lived a happy life. He has descendants still in Hawaii. And he loved Hawaii because it was a place where he could be treated equally. The United States was talking about democracy and racial and equality, and all men are created equal. And then Hawaii was already like, what are you even talking about? What are you even talking about? The United States still doesn't have it. Anyway, so Hawaii is like, equality means that your slaves should have the actual equal opportunity to collectively coexist and prosper and have their own, black people should have their own opportunity to have their own names on their own placards and have their own farms. They should have their own hospitals, or they should be able to do anything, right, that they want to do, resting upon the merits, right, resting upon their own work that they have done, right? As again, Voltaire, right, does it not rest upon the merit of the Mandarin rather than upon the birthright of an absolute super wealthy monarch? And America was still doing that, by the way. So the lords and ladies of America, all 90% of all the richest, most powerful people in the world, they're all descendants of feudal lords of Europe. Another U.S. capitalist crook was James Dole, founder of Dole Foods Corporation, cousin of Stanford Dole, a wealthy oligarch who collaborated with the U.S. military to steal our country. His workers lived in termite-ridden bunkhouses. Pay was barely enough for daily gruel. So in case you ever eat Dole pineapples, remember, one of the people who stopped, the people who are trying to fight against a system of wars over resources forever for control of a tiny minority of capitalist elite, Dole was one of the people who helped crush Hawaii. And he became the first governor. After having been president of the apartheid-like government that deposed Liliuokalani, he became a pineapple land baron after a series of sweetheart deals over the entire island of Lanai. You know who owns Lanai today? one of the top 10 richest people in the world, Larry Ellison, CEO of Oracle. He runs the Western TikTok algorithm and information. So if TikTok got worse after 2021, it's because of the guy who owns this island, that Mr. Dole Pineapples took over. Anyway, Emekalele Nalai world fought for the world's first universal healthcare system in 1859. No Western country would attempt socialized medicine for over a century. The U.S. estimated our free healthcare for selfish profit. Today, U.S. workers are well stripped by privatized healthcare. So if you want Medicare for all, what you should do is restore Hawaii to full sovereignty and return it against the colonial capitalist occupation of the United States. Because the Hawaiian system, Queen's medical system, by the way, still exists. The U.S. is just forcefully suppressing it, right? Queen's medical system is kind of like Ansarallah. You know, it's like it still exists. It's just like being denied its existence, right? Actually, everything is like that, right? It's a quantum, wavelength between, atrocity, joy, or stop atrocity, collective fight. It's kind of like, are you at the brunch or are you like outside the brunch saying free PELSTINE, right? In Hawaii, right, there's private mega capitalist corporate healthcare, but there's also the Queen's medical system. If you know how to get it, you can actually still get free healthcare in Hawaii. But it's like the U.S. is trying to suppress the fact that Hawaiians, we're basically like self-funding our own shadow free healthcare system, right? But the U.S. is trying to obliterate it off the face of as we speak. If you know exactly what to do, because the U.S. is trying to make it not hard to get as possible. If you know who to talk to, who to call, where to go, you can get free healthcare. I'm not saying you should come to Hawaii and try to get free healthcare, because it is not going to work like that. The U.S. makes sure of that. But like Hawaii's Native Hawaiians, we still run Native Hawaiians and members of the Hawaiian country that tried our best are still existing in a system, and Queen's medical system still exists. The U.S. is trying to make it as defunded as possible so that they can maximize their profit selling $40,000 cancer treatments, right? But and really everywhere there is this fight is always happening, like basically everywhere. But the universal healthcare as a concept in the modern era was begun in Hawaii, and it was begun by this woman. The U.S. illegal state Department of Education is forcing kids out of Hawaiian education at Castle High School, a U.S. school literally named after a colonizer capitalist who destroyed Hawaii to make tons of dollars in a brutal sugar plantations. As James Bicknell Castle acquired vast wealth collaborating with the U.S. overthrow of sovereign Hawaii, stealing our land and growing cash crops with slave-like plantations. There's a school named literally after this person. And he lobbied for one of the people who lobbied for the annexation. Castle and Cook, if you ever heard of that name in Hawaii, it was one of the people that destroyed everything that was good in Hawaii for his own personal profit. Centuries of extractive agriculture helped set the stage for the Maui fires. The sugar and pineapple plantations that dominate the Hawaiian island changed the landscape, how the water flows, and contributed to the devastation of the fire. So this is how land and environmental management and resource control also caused the fires and the mass death and displacement of countless people in Maui, in Lahaina. Why do Hawaiian, again, speaking on informational control, why do Hawaiian kids go to McKinley School, named for the U.S. president who stole Hawaii, banned our language and culture, removed our universal health care, destroyed our nation, denationalized it, erased the history? It is to brainwash our kids into loving U.S. genocidal invaders. This is the largest school in Hawaii. It's the largest student body count school in Hawaii. And it literally has a man holding a completely illegitimate treaty of annexation in his hand that everybody has to walk past and like praise like every day in Hawaii. It's like the statue itself is a total lie. The treaty was never even ratified by the Congress. Everything about it is completely corrupt and stolen. Anyway, this verifies a figure who was instrumental in making sure the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom was solidified. Second, the statue is on that campus. He's holding a treaty of annexation. There is no treaty of annexation, so essentially it's a propaganda meant to make people think there was a legitimate annexation under the law when in fact there wasn't. So again, right? So this is how, again, going all the way back, right? You can't have large scale, because most humans don't want to be participating in some horrific, corrupt, lie-filled evil to benefit a tiny minority of selfish people. So you have to have this. Every statue in the, for the most part in the collective West is just a lie. And not just the statues, but everything that they represent and everything in the books and what they teach when it really matters is nonsense. And absolutely in Hawaii, it is complete lies. In fact, if the United Americans would be better off if Hawaii was just what it was before the U.S. annexation and so-called statehood. Walter F. Dillingham, a self-proclaimed oligarch, conspired to overthrow Hawaii for money, constructed the U.S. Navy base here. He built his mansion on top of a sacred Hawaiian shrine at Diamond Head. La Pietra is a now fancy private school that is built in his residence. It is a real colonizer academy. Speaking of schools, right? Where are you going to go to school? Western school is a brainwashing system. It's a conditioning system. Just in general, as I've already pointed out. Universities come from the priestly disinformational conditioning system. The priestly castes, right, is what created the professorial caste. It's nothing to do with education. It's about mass control. La Pietra, Dillingham's former estate, Walter Francis Dillingham, the self-proclaimed oligarch of Hawaii, conspired to overthrow our sovereign country for his personal gain. He constructed Navy-based docks and dredged Hawaiian agriculture. And he basically destroyed all of our food sovereignty, where he destroyed large quantities of our food sovereignty by dredging, or basically, it's kind of like, when they fill cement into a Middle Easterners' olive water. The water comes out to feed their people and to grow their olives. The United States basically did the same thing. It's like shooting all the buffalo to starve the Native Americans. So this guy was in charge of starving Hawaiians and controlling all of our, and then also building massive military that's the war part of the resource wars. He built his mansion on top of the sacred Hawaiian shrine. This is him, U.S. military overthrowing Hawaii for Hawaii oligarchy and imperial base. He literally said, to make certain that the Hawaiian oligarchy kept control of the territorial government, he hid this. There was a trial where a woman, a white woman in Hawaii, was the wife of an officer, was claimed to have been assaulted, sexually assaulted. They basically picked a random Hawaiian guy and he was a fighter, and he was, slightly known, but he was basically just some guy, and they basically lynched him. They killed him in Hawaii, and this guy said, we have to control the situation, because it was basically a racist lynching of a native Hawaiian, and he just said we have to keep the island oligarchy control of our territorial government. Hawaii and Honolulu, Hawaii is the playground of the personnel of the Army and Navy. He just straight up said that. That's him saying it. It's not a critic. This is the Americans and the U.S. military personnel and their beneficiaries, and they call themselves oligarchs, right? This is not, some communist or socialist or some left 19-year-old going, oh man, America's oligarchs are so terrible, I hate Bill Gates. He said we are oligarchs. This is an American man saying we are oligarchs. We have to keep our playground for the Army and Navy. That is what Hawaii actually is, right? After the U.S. occupation, there's nothing to do with freedom and democracy. It's just a playground for rich people like this. Okay, this is the person that died, and they killed him, and he gave everybody a 1-hour jail sentence where they hung around and had highballs and played golf with each other. They played mini golf in a mansion somewhere, right? This is them here. This is the white people and the military that gang up and killed the Native Hawaiian, and they printed a bunch of racist comics like this. And I could go on forever, so I should stop. But anyway, long story short, this is the remnants of Sovereign Hawaii's hydropower facilities, which provided nationalized power for little to no charge. Today, the U.S.-backed Hawaiian Electric burns fossil fuel and charges 45 cents per kilowatt hour, higher than any U.S. state. So Hawaii had free electricity. Now it has the most expensive electricity. Hawaii had a universal health care. Now we have the worst health outcomes. We struggle to the extent that we get health care is when we still operate a shadow Hawaiian universal healthcare system against the United States' will. To the extent that we still live, it is in the face, because the United States has been trying to wipe us out, it banned our language and culture. To the extent there are any Hawaiians today, it is that we continue to resist the U.S. empire, like the Basque. So Native Americans, the people of the Basque region of Spain against the Romans and against all of Europe's empire, and Hawaiians and all colonized people around the world. We share that. In that and finally, Hawaii, like all these other places I've brought about, they're very large places that resist the empire, very large ones. Not just Hawaii is not a very big place, but they are very large in population and in scope, and in population and in geography. But there are alternatives. It is not human nature inevitable that there must be war over resources, whether those are Hawaiian electricity, whether that is Bolivian lithium, whether that is Congolese minerals and coltan and copper in Chile, or that is the geostrategic bases that could be built in Palestine, whether that is the rubber and the tea in the rubber in Vietnam, the tea in China. It is not necessary that these wars must go on. If these wars do go on, one thing that Americans don't actually realize is that in fact they are overmatched. They are behind. They're like they are already an entire generation behind the world's most powerful military. I won't say which. You can guess which one it is. If you don't know, I'm not going to tell you which one it is. But Americans are behind. In the hypersonics, they are leagues and bounds behind, right? And the one they want to fight, right? Because it's all the Fallout world is actually Fallout is a passe world, because the enemy that they want to fight, it will not result in everyone's annihilation. It actually will mostly just result in their annihilation. In electronic warfare, in AI warfare, in automated cloud warfare, the most advanced modern warfare, including intercepting of the missiles. Whether the U.S. and its allies can even operate the kind of hardware and the kind of control, targeting, and deliverance systems, it's already questionable. And in fact, like a lot of the analysts are saying, the ones that have any kind of intellectual integrity, a very short. Speaking of resources, intellectual integrity, very short resource in the West. In the eye of the hurricane of empire, the dwindling eye as it runs out of money. That's why the propaganda is getting worse. If you're wondering why things are getting boring and lower quality and you have less bread and the circuses on Netflix are not as good anymore, it's because the hurricane is running out, which is a good thing, but it's also going to be a little bit annoying in the medium term, in the short term, because America doesn't have enough money to pay, and it's wasting what money it has on shrimp Jesus, generative AI nonsense, right? So, but like this is more realistic, because actually, in fact, the West is overmatched in deliverance, in AI, in nuclear. Like you can have all the nukes you want, doesn't matter. If you can't get them where they got to go, which they can't, the S5, S600s that exist now and beyond, and it's only increasing every day. Every day, it's the disparity. The U.S. and the West is already way behind when it comes to that, and every day it grows bigger, right? And nobody wants nuclear war. That's not a good thing. But if it was to break out, this is based upon there's some recent articles, and you probably might see a little bit of this in the headlines, but the reality is that like there's a reason why there's a country that is saying certain things, right? And they're not afraid to just say that. They're like, if you step over this line, we're not gonna hit Europe. U.S. is gonna be wiped out, right? And they're comfortable to say that because because this is also a country they don't like trying not to start things, and they don't bluff, they don't mess around, right? But the reality is that the West is overmatched, right? Fallout can't really happen because, or it can happen for the U.S. Fallout can happen for the U.S. and for Europe, but because of the level of overmatch that they're in and the level of the loss of their own resources, and this is why I kind of subtitled this stream. How believing, right? I subtitled this stream like it's is war over resources human nature, and believing that it is can cause your lights to go out. Your lights, not other people's lights, your lights, right? Like you're having blackouts. You know where it isn't having blackouts? Beijing is not having blackouts. You know where like Moscow isn't having blackouts. You know who isn't having blackouts? You know who isn't having a food shortage? You know, like all of China, they actually have like massively increased their green spaces. They've undesertified and they have massive food storage, and they're building new forms of food storage, new forms of food production, vertical gardens, horizontalized. They're greening thousands and thousands of miles of former desert and making it into food. They have like underground storage. I mean, it's like it's you know, the world is going like this. There's the descendants of the Greco-Roman hurricane. You know, they're descending deeper and deeper into this abyss, militarily, economically, sustainable, preparedness wise. You know, as a robust civilization, in terms of global like soft power. What people don't look up. Nobody looks up to the people that's all in the brown and red and black area in this. I mean, the darkened out area. Nobody looks up to them anymore. You know, inside the U.S. and Europe, I think they still tell themselves everybody loves them, right? But that's not on a global scale. I'm sorry if this is a rude awakening, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is, and if anything, if the leaders of the collective West ultimately like really did like completely lose it in a really bad way, and do something incredibly stupid, like this is what it would look like, you know? I mean, not exactly, but it's going to look more like that, you know? And the rest of the world will continue doing better, not fighting wars over resources, but existing in a world of equals. Like the Hawaiian model is just an example of that, right? But the Silk Road is another example of that. Like the Native Americans civilizations that had mutual trade with basically no wars, like no any large scale wars for centuries and millennia, right? They had ritualistic combat and ritualistic sports games, right? You can play football and you can play sports, and even Africans figured out these kinds of things. They're ritualistic because people get hot-headed, especially dudes, right? Too much testosterone. But then you can like exert that and like get the energy out and don't have that spill and explode out into a war, right? Which then you can start a hurricane. It's kind of like the mass uncontrolled violence and no way to have a release valve on that is part of what starts the hurricanes, right? Because all you gotta do is you have a bunch of war, somebody has a bunch of capital, and then somebody else who's like, I got this really good idea for how we can write a story that can BS everybody into keeping doing this war thing, right? I know we can get everybody to keep killing each other. If all those things come together, then you can start a hurricane. And then it's a human aberration. It's humans doing it, but it's not like a necessary process that has to happen, right? And the rest of the world is going, let us stop doing this unnecessary hurricaning of warring over those resources to collect them and then brainwash more people, to make more wars for more resources, to collect them and then brainwash more people, to make wars to get more resources to, right? So at this point, if the people that are in the dying, it's becoming, you know, the U.S. was a Category 5 hurricane in the 20th century, you know, 2000. Now it's a Category 4 by the 2010s, and then it's a 3, and then now it's more like a Category 2 or 1. It's becoming a tropical storm, right? And it's like you ain't gonna do much against anybody outside of that. You know, you falling apart. You know, the U.S. is getting its ass kicked out of Iraq and Syria as we speak, right? That's less resources, right? To brainwash more people, build more weapons to fight more wars, right? So this can't go on for you running out of, we're gonna steal lithium and then we'll have, green war. We'll have green imperial wars to brainwash. That's not gonna work because these people, it's like you need money to pay people to brainwash people, and you need global soft power, and you need to control TikTok. You need global. You don't even have 6G. You don't have 5G. You don't have 6G. You don't have the most advanced, actual, useful AI. You only got generative AI. You're wasting all that crap with Sam Altman's, professional plagiarism software, and making really bad big titty waifus that are too shiny and obviously fake, and only people who fall for that crap are like brain damaged 40 to 70-year-olds from the West. I mean, nobody likes that shit. That's not a sustainable hurricane. I mean, the imperialism is not sustainable, but that is not a system that can continue to power an empire for any much longer. That's what, in the rise of BRICS and the de-dollarization globally, and every loss of a U.S. military base is a loss of also resource control, which is this loss of narrative control with the money to pay bullshit artists and liars, the priestly cast of New York and London, etc. That is a loss, and that's why everyone is. That's why we got like 10 scam calls this week from people like going, would you like to be? We will forcefully unsubscribe you from Spectrum because India is also in that hurricane as one of their vassals, and the Americans that hire them, they're like, everyone is begging. The universities are all begging me for money. I'm like, I'm not giving you any money. Why would I give you money to go do atrocities around the world? University that I went to and I don't love. Right? Why would I give you money to be the number one recruiter for Lockheed Martin and the U.S. military, which the U.S. debt is? I'm not giving you any money, but they need money because they're running out. Anyway, long story short, so this, if you keep doing it though, if you really insist on that, then you could get completely wiped out, and it's not going to actually hurt the other side that much. And also, if it does hurt the other side, you should know the Chinese are willing to go all the way. They don't care. They will. It's unlikely that will come to that because the West will just get completely. Washington D.C., London, etc. They would just become parking lots. D.C., Wall Street, just be vaporized, and then that would be it. Most Americans are not going to fight for America. Nobody loves America. American soldiers don't like America. Most American soldiers are like 2 steps away from, with some few exceptions. Most American soldiers are like kind of disgusted. They're really upset. There's a quiet dissension across the entire U.S. ranks. If it came down to it, most Americans, if they can go in to get out and then have their bread in circuses, get a GI Bill, some soldiers, might stick. That's why they're sticking around, so they can pay their freaking health care and get some education or something. That's what they think anyway. They don't realize what they're getting into, right? There is no U.S. military. The U.S. military is like nowhere meeting its recruitment goals, and everybody's still in. It's a bunch of people that have they can. Most of them can see the writing on the wall. They just hope they can kind of get out somehow. If the U.S. actually went to a serious war, I think most Americans will just be, I'm not launching anything. I'm just, if the U.S. really went to a serious war with a serious peer, most Americans are like, please, they would just be, I'm out of here, right? I'm out of here. Like Lindsey Graham would have to launch it himself, right? But by the time Lindsey Graham hits the button to launch anything into Russia would already have taken it out. And China will have hacked the rest of it. The U.S. will just be dark. Anyway, so I mean, that's why it's like it's really like it behooves everybody to push as much pressure on that imperial structure to get it to drain the pus out of it, to bring it down to a category 1 in a tropical storm, right? Tropical storm. Capitalist, colonialist, racist system before get it squeezed out from the outside and from the inside as fast as possible, because it's not in the interest of any American or European, really, right? To turn into that. Nobody wants that. Even Russians, Chinese, the global majority, they don't really want to just have to hurt everybody or cause the harm to any more people anywhere, right? And people in the center of the hurricane, of the resource warriors, they don't want to get hurt, and most Americans don't really want to just go around and hurt innocent people in the Middle East. They don't sign up. Nobody signs up for that, right? Nobody's when they get there and they start hurting people, then they come back. That's why the suicide rate is so high out of the U.S. military, right? But in the long run, nobody really wants this. But it is a small group of people have kept this scam going on a global scale for a long, long time, and it has to go away as soon as possible. The end. If you like this stream, don't forget you can support us at ko-fi.com/silverspook. You can also, if you have for a one-time donation, if you would like to help us out, you can also, in an ongoing fashion, give us support at patreon.com/Neofeud. It is the Patreon site for us as well. You get access to behind the scenes on what we are. Wait, what? Oh, anyways. What? Oh, latest activity. Okay. If you want to get more updates on what we're working on and stuff at the Silver Spoon Cooperative, like doing land back, restoring the ecology and the natural world here, having birthday parties. You're not just paying for our birthday cake. Learn more about and discover more about what we're working on with Neofeud 2, or what basically I'm working on Neofeud 2. And this is all screenshots from the game that I do the art, the writing, the music, and programming basically as a solo dev. I'm going to be doing that later on the Twitch stream. You can become a Patreon supporter, and also you can help us keep doing this work, and of course also get access to Silver Spook Discord and the Silver Spook University, right? So again, I talked about universities that you don't want to support because you don't want to be part of GENOCIDE Joy University. The Silver Spook University combines left education and decolonized history, current struggles, imagined futures, cultural analysis from a native Hawaiian activist, educator, science fiction writer, and game developer. That's my perspective. And of course, Silver Spook University is also for the low price of $1 or whatever your Patreon is, just so you can get access to it. And of course, you can also one new thing. My indigenous game devs friends, they're all like, we're all on Blue Sky. So I'm like, okay, well, here's a bunch of us on Blue Sky. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll have to, I follow all my indigenous. By the way, you can follow any of these people that I'm following. These are basically all my indigenous, fellow indigenous game developers. Megan Byrne, and some of these I don't actually know all of them. Vel Selikov is Naftali Falconer. Sadek Karonis is. Miranda Du is another one. Santo. I've talked with many of these people on panels I've done in the past on this channel as well. But you can now you can follow Silver Spook on. You can follow me on Blue Sky, which looks like Twitter. I've never actually used it. I've never actually used it before till today. Being peer pressured by my peers. Not being peer pressured. I just read. Oh, they're all on it. So okay, fine. I'm not gonna use it because somebody said, "Oh, I like I don't know." A lot of people have been said they were on it, but I finally jumped. All right, I'm not jumping. I just have one. I don't know how much I will be posting there, but you can also follow @SilverSpookGuy on Twitter for my personal takes. You can get games like Neofeud, which is a anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-colonial cyberpunk adventure game that I worked on 2.5 years doing the writing, music, art, and programming. And it is also a game that is available on Steam on sale right now. So don't forget to run over and grab it if you like those kinds of games. Retro 90s games, adventure games, point-and-click adventure games, satirical games. Do you like anti-war hippie Terminators, unplugged communist Matrix agents, delinquent ex-con drug dealer robots that are trying to then turn into uprising leaders, overthrowing palace at Versailles, floating in the air. Speaking of feudal and imperial royalty sitting in their palaces, Neofeud is literally a game where the people float above the planet in their palace, watching it all die, and then people trying to stop them from killing the planet. Anyways, that is Neofeud. It is a weird labor of love, and you can also leave a very short review for it, and does help us get the game discovered in the Steam algorithm when people are looking for games to play. You can also you can also get Neofeud on itch.io for Windows and for Mac and for Linux on itch.io over here. It is a game that also you can get it without having to install Steam if you don't want to do that. It's also on sale on itch as well. And there's other games like Decolonators and the Digistar and Pigeonwick Gun and Woman is a book by Holly who was raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity and is meant to be a historical retelling. It's not a historical retelling, but a work of fiction that lends a different perspective to what is usually read. I apologize, I did not read people's chat. I will read some now. I'm sorry, I did not do that. I forgot. But it's late in the time. I looked at the clock and I was like, oh, you gotta go. Thanks a lot, Strin. Thanks, Strin, for dropping in. Thank you for compliments on our couples. Okay, have a good stream, Grant, and thanks SCH for dropping in as well. I know I don't always interact with the chat too much, and I forgot today. I'll try to do more next time. Anyways, you can also get Women. That's a book that critiques right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity, and you can also follow @SilverSpook Games at Octodon.social. And Axe. I have moved. Another update. I have moved because Octodon is shutting down. It's a bit annoying, but it is what it is. Mastodon apparently has lost a million. Has dropped by 1 million active users since 2022, which is unfortunate. So the instance I was on shut down. Follow at Silverspook Guy. At Silverspook Games at wandering.shop. And thanks to our friend Zilla, who gave me the invite for this new instance. Yes. And at Silverspook Games, and I gotta think about it every time I do this for the next little bit because it's a new outro. I start talking really fast because I just have this whole thing memorized, basically. At Silverspook Games at mastodon.social is the other account. So at Silverspook Games at wandering.shop or at Silverspook Games at mastodon.social. There you go. Those are the two Mastodon. And of course, also follow Silverspook Games. We're on Instagram, Facebook, all over the place. Silverspook Games minus the E and Silver on Twitter for the games related stuff. Terminus C is Terminus Cyberstar is a cyberpunk RPG. I'm the content director / lead writer of. And Terminus Cyberstar is set in the world of Neofeud and Neofeud 2 and the Terminus universe. So yeah, it's another game that I just kind of wrote the game design document and other people are making the game. You can also follow. I always typed Holly Aardvark. That's weird. Holly Ard. That's not what it is. At Allergic to Blue is Holly's handle, writer, producer, moderator, and more. Married to myself, Linebacker for Hawaii. MECFS Haver. Of course, please take the ongoing pan. We're at the U.S. just reinstated hospital reporting, hospitalizations due to COVID reporting. So be careful out there. And yes, also, thank you to all the people on this list. Where's my list? Come on, it's 2:16. Come on, computer. Don't go low resources on me now. Don't resource war on me now, computer. Give me my resources back. Thank you, all these people, for your support. Without the support, it's hard to keep doing this work. So thank you for your ongoing Patreon patronage. It is massively appreciated. And yes. Until next time, keep your mirror shades polished. Be excellent to each other. And have a good day. Don't start new wars for resources and then take the resources and then print money and then pay people to brainwash people to keep doing that. That's bad. Okay, in case it wasn't clear. I don't think that it's inevitable and it's not good. It's not a good thing to do. It's bad. Okay. Anyway.